Hey everybody, Kerry Waldy here in the hangar at Giving Wings Aviation, and I want to talk to you about the importance and the skills and best practices of customer service within the flight school industry. Because whether you're a CFI, mechanic, or staff personnel, it's important to recognize that we are in the people business. I know that we have aircraft and lots of mechanical things, but it goes beyond the mechanical to the personal. We simply use aircraft to curate experiences for people, and people matter. And so this video and this training is about how to acquire and develop the customer service skills that will set you apart in the industry. Because let's face it, all pilots know basically the same stuff. Otherwise, we wouldn't get our tickets, we wouldn't get our ratings. But not all pilots know the same people or have the same relationships. And so much gets done in aviation through those relationships. I think of a time when I was teaching a ground school, and as I was teaching this ground school, it was kind of a grind. It was a night class at a university, but in this class was a father and son. And the son was a high schooler, about 16 years of age. And this high schooler was given to me to train and to teach, and through high school now I was getting him his private license, and I had a connection with the family, and I was treating them well, and I was letting them know that they were valued, and I did my best job with them, and I had other connections within that family and the daughter as well. But one day the family bought a helicopter, which I did not see coming. And he flew it over to the airport. He'd say, "Hey, you want to go flying in this thing?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to go up for a ride." And so we took off. When we flew around, I'd never been in a helicopter before. And then as we were coming into a land, he said, "Do you think you'd like to learn how to fly this?" I'd say, "Yeah, I'd love to learn how to fly, but there's no way I could afford that." And I'm thinking in my mind, I'm a poor flight instructor. And he said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll pay for it." And that set me on a journey to a commercial rotorcraft rating that was all covered by this gentleman. But you see, I never would have seen this coming when they were sitting in the back at the ground school. You never know the relationships that you cultivate within the flight training season of your career, if it's a short season or a longer season like me. You never know how those relationships are going to matter. And so everybody is valuable, and everybody is worthy to be treated with respect and dignity and honor. And that is curating good customer experiences within our flight school. The first time I recognized this, I was taught by a pizza shop owner who helped me see this from a different perspective. He said, "You know, Kerry, when people buy from me, they're not buying a pizza. They're buying an experience. And the pizza is just part of the experience. But when it's delivered to their door, is it on time? Is it still hot? Is the cheese stuck to the top of the box?" These are all things that will enhance the experience. This is what they're looking for. It's not just that I learn a certain skill, but that I feel valued. You see, people are multi-sensory kinds of people. We're interdimensional. We have body and soul, 5 senses, and we have these experiences that we think about introspectively and then also in community, interpersonally. So it's a multi-dimensional experience that we have here on this earth. And what we want is at the end of the day, when people leave our flight school, we want them to say, "That was a good experience." Now, it may have been a challenging experience because we know that flying is challenging. But we want them to say, "I was valued and I did something good today. It was challenging," but they may not be able to put their finger on it, but they can say, "That was good." I surveyed hundreds of pilots for this training, and a number of quotes stuck out to me. One of them was from a 15,000-hour pilot who was just trying to get some recurrent training in a tail wheel. Yet his experience wasn't that great. He says this, "I can't relate everything that he said or did that rubbed me the wrong way. But the saying in customer service is that a customer may not remember exactly what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel. And I ain't ever going flying with that instructor again." Again, it wasn't the details he remembered, but he remembered that he didn't feel valued. So that customer experience matters no matter what we're doing. You see, we're not selling pizzas, but we are using aircraft and aviation to curate experiences for people. I'm thinking of a time Steve Jobs built a multi-zillion-dollar company out of Apple with this philosophy. I watched him during a symposium with thousands of people, and one man stood up to the microphone and began to really challenge Steve Jobs because Steve Jobs wasn't promoting some special software application that this man really liked or some kind of programming language that this man thought should be pushed by Apple. And it really created tension in the room because this man was challenging Steve Jobs. Steve, in a very calm way, said this: "I've made this mistake more than anyone. You don't start with the technology and try to fit it into some application, but rather you start with the customer experience and work backwards. You start with the customer experience. What's the outcome you want? And then work backwards from there. Create the technology to give you the customer experience the customer wants. You know what? The customer doesn't care about your specific software language that you really love. It's about the customer experience. That's what matters. What's the experience you want? And then work backwards from there." How does that relate to us in aviation? Well, we serve people, and people are people wherever they go. And every person on earth, I've never seen an exception, is looking for a face and a place. They're looking for a face that looks at them and says, "You matter to me, you're valuable," and a place where they can be a significant part of the story. A place where they can fit into the plot somewhere, like Cheers, where everybody knows your name. And that could be our flight school. From the first phone call or email or when they walk through the door, they should find a face that says you matter through our body language, through our verbal communication, and through how we respond to them. It says you matter to me. Remember, most communication is 93% is nonverbal. So what are the nonverbals when we encounter people, new people, old people, when we encounter them here? Do we communicate? Right now, you're the most important person on the planet, and you matter here, and you're an integral part of the story. Everybody's looking for a face and a place, and we need to curate those experiences and help them achieve that. You see, we have outsiders. They don't know the faces, they don't know the places, and they don't know the plot line. And then we kind of have newbies. They've just started coming in here. Maybe it's their first few flights or just after an intro flight. And then you have insiders. And if you're watching this video, it's likely wherever you're at, you're an insider. You know all the faces, you know all the places, you know where the donuts are kept, and you know the plot line. You know how the story unfolds in the lives of people in flight training. Well, how can you help someone that walks through the door or that first phone call? How can you help them know this is a place where you'll be valued, and we're going to help you be a key part of the story? We're going to show you the faces. We're going to show you the places, and we're going to make you part of the story. Your flight aviation journey is going to be a part of the fabric, of the tapestry of everyone else here on that journey. And so when people walk into our flight schools, is that what they see? Do they see people that value them? And do they see and feel a part of the story? Good customer service will help people feel that as quickly as possible, because places without faces are lonely, and places where they're not part of the story, where there are faces but they're not welcoming them into the story, those can be scary too, and uncertain, and we don't really know. Do you remember what it was like to be the new kid in school? Or you've gone to a place where you're kind of the outsider? Good customer service will help usher people from that new kid in school to being an insider, where they know the people, they know the places, and they know where they fit in the story. And that's an important part. Everybody's looking for a face that says you matter to me, and a place where you can be a part of the story. Some people have expressed experiences when I polled them as it relates to bad customer service within the flight school industry. Lindsay said this: "How about the basics? A new FBO with a flight school opened up on my field, so my friend and I went over to check it out. They had snacks and a couple of static displays, but what stood out was that no one came over to talk to us. Ever. No one ever came over to talk to us. They never asked us if we were interested in flying or whatever. Big fat fail. My school at the other end of the field always greets people as they walk in and asks if they can help.
Tony says, basic skills. Hello, welcome, what can we do for you? I can't say the number of times I've walked into a flight school and been met with a look of bewilderment, almost a sense of, who are you and how did you even get in here? I love that. And then I'll ask about getting a particular endorsement or getting checked out in the airplane. And it's like I've asked them to help me pack and move houses.
Leonard writes, for me, it's all about the customer service, how you were treated when you first enter the door. At my current school, I was immediately greeted and made to feel at home and welcome. What I thought would be a simple 10-minute conversation turned into 45 minutes as if I was seeing an old friend. Another example is when I had a plane and a lesson scheduled 2 weeks before my check ride went down for a maintenance issue. I got a personal phone call from the owner apologizing and explaining the issue. I've never experienced that in my prior schools. Also, it was a team effort that included my primary instructor as well as other instructors that all assisted me in getting me ready for my instrument check ride. So, everybody's looking for a place, everybody's looking for a face. Now, how do we actually implement that in our context? Well, you think about our context, most flight schools have 3 areas where we're in contact with the customer. We have common areas, we have the cockpit, and we have the personal spaces where they're not here at our flight school, but we're still in contact with them. So how do we curate experiences in those arenas? So here at Giving Wings and other flight schools, we have 3 areas where we really interface with the customer. We have the common areas like the lobbies, the classroom, or the hangar. We have the ramp and those common areas. And we have the cockpit where we're there doing instruction. And also we have personal spaces where the student's not necessarily at our school, but we're still contacting them and still doing instructing or personal connection with them. So let's divide them into those 3 areas and look at some of the best practices that we can implement to help people feel like this is where they can be a significant part of the story and where there's people here that value them. First, common areas. If you're in the lobby and someone walks through the door, the first thing you need to recognize, doesn't matter who it is, that person now is the most important person in your life. If you're seated in the lobby, maybe just to hang out, just to wait on a student, or just to shoot the breeze with staff, recognize this, that if you're in that place, you are now a director of first impressions. You are there to help people move from being an outsider to an insider. So when somebody comes in, if you're seated, stand up. If you don't know who they are, introduce yourself. Meet and greet. Maybe listen for a little bit about their story. And if you have time, and if they have time, perhaps begin to integrate them through the barriers from the outsider to the insider. Perhaps give them a tour. If you're giving them a tour, introduce them to as many faces as possible. When you walk through the hangar, introduce them to our maintenance staff and let them know that they keep our aircraft as safe as possible. Maybe the Jessica or the ramp staff is here and you want to introduce them to them, or Jessica's introducing them to you. However it is, just recognize that that person is the most important person in the building now. Maybe it's a new student, maybe it's a prospective student, maybe it's an old student and they're just passing through. They're already insiders. Just make them feel welcome. That's an important part. Don't ignore them. Don't just sit there and stare at your phone during that time. Now, if someone's brand new and they're walking in for the first time, boy, if you have some time, ask them their story. Ask them why they want to be a part of aviation. Understand what makes them tick a little bit. If they become your student, you can use that. And then the tour is a part of it. Introduce them to as many people as possible. And then leave some encouraging words. I'm so excited that you're here. We're so glad to be on this journey with you to help you receive your aviation tickets. But leave some words of encouragement with them and let them know that they made the right decision by coming in here. And this is a place where you want to be a part of the story. I'm so excited about your journey here, or I'm proud of you for taking the first steps toward your dream. I look forward to seeing you receive your ticket. These are all great phrases that we should have ready when we are interacting, especially with new customers, in the common areas. New students, I like this question or this statement. I ask them, would you tell me your story? Tell me your story. I want to know where they were raised. I want to know a little bit about their high school experience. I want to know maybe if they went to college or what they do a little bit for work. And then I want to know what drives them to learn to fly. Because what is driving them is something that I can tap into when we hit learning plateaus or when it's discouraging for them. I know that those days are coming. I'm looking for a reservoir that I can pour into so that on those difficult days we can draw out and make a difference in their flight training. So take an interest in them more than just the flying part. And in the process, you're letting them know, here's a face that values you as a person, not just as a dollar sign, not just as flight hours, but I value you as a person, and we are going to journey on your story together here in this setting. Giving Wings Aviation or your local flight school, this is the setting that your journey is going to take place, and I'm here to help you along that plot line. A place and a face. Then when you learn about them, learn about some outside interests, because there is, remember the levels of learning, rote, understanding, application, and correlation. Then as a flight instructor, you can take certain aspects of what they love and whatever they've already mastered perhaps in their life and use those in order to help them learn in the cockpit or in their aviation journey. For instance, I had a student who loved golf, and as he was learning and working toward his pre-solo and his solo, I would grade his landings using golf terms. I'd say, yeah, that one there, that was a bogey. Not quite what we wanted to. It wasn't on the center line. The nose wasn't quite aligned where we needed it to go. I needed to help you on the controls a little bit to make sure that we didn't bounce it too bad. That was a bogey, maybe a double bogey. And then as he began to land them on his own, I'd say, you know what? That was a par. That one I'll give you a par. And then if it was just a solid greaser or was in challenging circumstances like a difficult crosswind, but he kept it on the center line, the nose aligned with the runway, he landed on the correct wheel, then I say, dude, you birdied that one. That was a fantastic landing. And I used that as we came close to solo. I was able to describe to him how close he was to solo. I would say, sir, what we're looking for here is we need you to fly pars, consistent pars. This lesson, you shot scratch. The next lesson, I need you to shoot scratch for a number of lessons, and then I will be comfortable allowing you to solo. And that gave him something to shoot for. And then he began to be his own doctor. He could grade his own landings, his own flight instructor in his mind, which is what we want. We're trying to raise pilots or trying to teach pilots, not just students. So when you learn something about them, then you can tap into that to help correlate knowledge as well. So remember, they're people that have a life outside of aviation, and a good instructor will tap into that. Another thing that we can do is if somebody's just sitting there or they're waiting, and we have some time, maybe we're waiting on a student as well, or we have a student and we're going to bring them into the hangar to look at an aircraft where the cowling is off. And I try to help people take those opportunities. We've got maybe a 100-hour going on, the cowling's off. I want them to see that there's stuff that happens forward of the firewall that actually correlates with the checklist in the airplane. That when we're doing the run-up, for instance, and we pull the carb heat out, or we pull the carb heat out on before landing checklist, what is actually happening there? And you can see it in forward of the firewall with the cowling off. When you prime the aircraft, what is happening? A little tube goes to this one cylinder, and it's inserting fuel right into that cylinder, and they can actually see those when the heater is turned on. That baffling is shifted and moved so that heat is brought into the cockpit. They can see that. And if you're bringing your student out to look at an aircraft without the cowling on, then maybe there's someone else that's kind of got that new kid in school lost look. Invite them and say, hey, would you like to come and be a part? Because the more connection they have personally with the faces around them, the more they'll feel like that they fit in. It's another great thing to do. Now let's talk about the cockpit. Obviously, this is the meat and potatoes of what we do in our training, is that we're training them inside the cockpit. And I'm wondering right now if you've ever had an instructor that didn't make you feel valuable in the cockpit. And what was that like? And you can talk about it in the comments below. If you've ever had an instructor that didn't quite value you, and what did they do to show you that you really weren't that important to them? Answer that in the comments. Now, how can we help people understand that here's a face that values you and this is a place where you matter inside the cockpit in that context? Well, first, safety is important. When we value them and we say, you know what, the weather is kind of marginal today, and I know you want to fly, I want to fly too, and in your mind you're thinking, I could handle these winds, or I could handle this, it'd be fine, but it's not about handling it. It's about curating learning experiences. And I've had situations where I've just had to tell people, this would not be a good learning day for you. You would not get anything out of it. I'd have to do most of the flying. And so instead of looking at them as dollar signs, sometimes the no-go decision shows that you value them. I remember having a lesson, it was on soft field landings, and I was teaching a mother of 5. And as we were coming, I was flying to the airport that had the soft field. I was going to meet her there. And as I was coming in, it was just kind of one of those really wind-sheary days that it took quite a bit of pilot skill to get that airplane down there, and she was not at that level. And I landed it, I taxied over, her kids were excited to go for an airplane ride, but I told her, I said, it wouldn't be right of me to take a mother of 5 up today. It's just not safe. And in that moment, I valued her. I said, you matter, your kids matter, your family matters, and I'm going to just fly this airplane back to the hangar because it's just not worth it today. Then there are other times when I didn't make the right decision. I remember trying to get a night cross country in with a student, and we were going to shoot down to Grand Rapids and back, about a 2-hour flight, check the box off for his private license. And in our area of the country, there's a lot of snow squalls. And the snow squalls were there, and they were coming in, and we got out in time, but then the snow squalls started to come, and it was dark and stormy night. And we flew about 10 minutes, and you know what? Just that kind of buzzer goes off, those little warning flags. You know, your mind starts going about those links in the chain. I need to break the link here. And I said, let's just go back. This isn't shaping up to be the weather that we had hoped it was going to be. And so we were in the clear, and as we went back to the airport, there was a snow squall that was right over the airport. Remember, it's dark, it's night, and the snow was blowing. It was very blustery. Pretty strong storm. And I thought, the field went IFR. But you know what? I'm an instrument-rated pilot. Let's just shoot the ILS. I'm in a 152, mind you. And so I shot the ILS, and we were lined up, and I'm there on the localizer. I'm coming in, but we are getting bounced around everywhere. It's turbulent, and our little 152 felt like a kite in a March stiff wind. And I'm doing all I can to hold the localizer on the glide slope, and it was the first time and only time in the cockpit I was actually scared spitless, where the spit in my mouth dried up. I thought, I don't think I made the best decision here, but we're locked into this already. Let's just see if we can see the runway lights. And as I'm coming in past the final approach fix, I listened to an airliner clicked on and said, hey, has anybody made it in yet? And the tower said, no, we got a Cessna on final on the approach, and no one's made it in yet. And the airliner clicked back, we'll wait and see if he makes it before we try it. Well, we made it and landed, but my student became a car salesman. I didn't value him in that moment. I put him in a position where if I'm scared, I know he's terrified. And so sometimes the no-go decision is the decision that says you matter to me more than a flight hour or a paycheck. I've heard stories of instructors that are always on their phone. In our surveys, that kind of showed up. And so my rule of thumb is if I get on my phone, I tell the student why I'm on the phone. Hey, I'm going to check weather, or I'm going to check us in, or I'm going to check the NOTAMs at this airport, Or if I have to do something personal, I just let them know, oh man, I've got to return this text, just excuse me for a second. But I don't drone on the phone all day long, even on cross countries. I don't do that. You want to make sure that if you get on the phone, tell the student why you're doing it, so they're not thinking, oh, this guy, I'm paying this guy to surf the internet or Facebook or Instagram on his phone. Show enthusiasm. Show enthusiasm. For me, if you're going to fly with me and you do something well, I'm going to clap for you. I'm going to give you a seated ovation. I'm going to say, that was amazing. And I want them to picture people all lined up around that runway just clapping for that landing. Because you know what? Landing an airplane is stinking hard. And so when you accomplish that, that is a feat. During solo time, I'm taking pictures. I'll often videotape the first solo from as close as I can get to the ramp, depending on or to the runway, depending on what airport I'm at. I'll videotape that and show that to them. And then also, you should have good verbal affirmations. That was amazing. Actually, today I was flying with a guy who, in a pretty stiff crosswind, and he's getting recurrent. He hadn't flown in a year. He changed jobs. He had a child. And now he's just getting back in the air, and the winds were gusty, in the double digits, 10 to 20. And he had a good cross when he came in, and he landed that thing so well. I applauded, and I said, that was a work of art. That was amazing. That was Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel of landings. I wanted him to know that he did something well. So we should all have good phrases that encourage and show enthusiasm, and even nonverbals like clapping and those kind of things to help people understand that you're valued and you made a difference here. We're curating that experience. And, when we're droning around in the traffic pattern doing touch and goes all day long, keep in mind that student is accomplishing something that is unnatural. Humans are not natural flyers. And so as they're breaking through those barriers and those learning plateaus, boy, cheer them on. It's so important that even if they had a rough day, let them know that learning plateaus and challenges are all part of the process, and that everything they've ever learned in their life, there were challenges and plateaus that they needed to persevere through. This is no different. Then you can share with them also some of your personal experiences that you've had and the challenges that you've had. Sometimes when I fly with people in our twin engine trainer, and the steep turns are a challenge. I remember me personally struggling with these steep turns because in a Cessna or 172, you're not going to climb or descend that fast. But in the twin trainers, you can gain or lose 100 feet just like that. And it takes a different kind of touch. And it was a maneuver that I struggle with. And when I have a student that struggles with a maneuver like that, I say, you know what? This is the maneuver that got me. This is the one that you will get. It's a time thing. Time and pressure will bring the breakthrough. And so when you share with them a little bit about your struggles, that kind of helps them understand that you've gone along this route before. You're ahead in the movie. You're ahead in the story, and you're just bringing them along, and it will help reassure them. Another phrase that I think is important, or I like to use, I stole from a piano teacher of mine. I wanted to learn piano so that at my wedding I could play it for my wife. And a few years before I even met my wife, I anticipated that moment. So I started taking piano lessons. And about 3 months in, as I'm plunking away, he stopped and he said to me, "You're starting to sound like a piano player." And you know what? That made me want to practice more. It made me want to go more. And so sometimes we could say, you know what? You're starting to fly this thing like a pilot, or a professional pilot if they have these career aspirations, and that's encouraging for them. My wife does a lot of work with horses, and so she'll take ornery horses and try to make them less ornery. I guess that's what horse people do. And one of the things she tells me is that with horses you have to reward the try. And so sometimes if the result isn't what you want, but the effort was there, you could reward the try. And then reward what you want to see more of. Man, great job clearing the area here. Thanks for lifting that wing up. Or, man, way to go, follow through on the controls on that crosswind landing. Great job, more right rudder, you've done it. I love that, way to go. Encourage what you want more of. Lastly, there are personal spaces. So we talk about the common areas, you're the director of first impressions. In the cockpit, you're there as that flight instructor, but you're also curating experience that says, you matter to me. Then there are personal spaces. The spaces that the student inhabits most of the time. Their home, car, online. How are we connecting with them in those personal spaces? Well, when I get a student and I get their name and their email, what I do is I send out an email that says, hello, I'm Kerry Walde from Giving Wings, and I hear that you're interested in learning and getting a multi-engine rating. Man, I'm looking forward to flying with you. And I send them the materials. I send them some videos to watch. I just give them a bunch of resources right off the bat. And I always include the phrase, I'm looking forward to flying with you. And so when somebody makes a phone call to our office, or when someone reaches out by email, and then our staff is looking for an instructor for them, once we get their name, we should contact them right away, because that is when they are interested. And I just assume the sale. I'm looking forward to flying with you. When can we get this set up? And you start the process. And I like getting their email contact. And different generations will highlight different things, or they'll like to be communicated in a certain way. And I try to find out what the best way is. And it's not always 100%, but text, email, phone call, whatever that is. I do like the text and or email because it leaves a train of communication that we can always refer back to. And then maybe perhaps on that first lesson or the first few lessons, we can, or actually every time before someone comes in for a lesson, I may send them a video. It could be an Embry-Riddle video or a Bold Method or some other guru on YouTube if it's the maneuver we're looking to do, or maybe we're looking at the six-pack instruments. And so here's a good animation of that. And then I send the video, the link, and I say, I'm looking forward to discussing this with you before we fly. And that lets them know, I plant the seed that, hey, I want you to watch this, and this is going to matter because we're going to talk about it, and I want to ask you some questions about this, and we're going to dialogue here. I'm looking forward to watching this with you, or not watching it, but discussing this with you as you start our lesson today or tomorrow or whatever time that is. So these communications are important. If a student is always waiting for you to return their calls or their texts or their emails, that communicates you don't matter to me. And so we want to be prompt as it relates to our communication outside of the flight school, in their personal spaces. And then take the time after a milestone. Every story has a story arc. Every plot lines have key moments in the plot. Aviation's no different. That first intro flight. Let's talk about the intro flight. Get to know the person's name before they show up. And as they show up, greet them by name. If they have kids, get on their level, greet them, and make them feel like they just walked into the best place on earth. And then you have a plan ready. You can sit them down and share, this is what we're doing, and walk them out, walk through the pre-flight, and then you kind of have an assessment in your mind about what can we do on this intro flight. You know how much time is allotted for it. How can we make this the best experience possible? If it's a great, smooth day, then all the better. But make sure our turns are shallow. We're not yanking and banking. We don't want to make anyone nauseous. People want to learn to fly. The last thing they need is to feel nauseous at the end of it, because in their mind they're thinking, I don't know if I can do this. So I have a plan sometimes. If it's bumpy, it's going to be a little shorter intro flight. And if they live nearby, I want to see if we can fly over their house and make that kind of a cool experience as they see their house from a new perspective. Then at the end of the intro flight, man, we say it was great flying with you, and I may introduce them to a number of instructors, and I always say, this is our best instructor. If you get this instructor here, you're going to be so happy. And this instructor here, this instructor is great too. They're our best, and every instructor that we have here at Giving Wings is amazing. So no matter who you get here, it's going to be great. And then handwrite a note to them to say it was great flying with you. I look forward to seeing you complete your journey in aviation here at Giving Wings. So that intro flight is a great customer service moment. What about solo? It's a great time to make a moment and to make them feel like they did great. So for me personally, I'm a guy who will clip the wings. I'll cut the back of the shirt and make a note on it so that they can keep that. They can frame that and hang that up. It's a big accomplishment. Not everybody does that anymore. I guess I'm kind of old school. I'd be interested to know, do you cut the shirt? Do you trim that or not? Or do you do something else to mark that solo? Take pictures, post them on social media, and make a big deal out of somebody soloing. What about that first solo cross country? You can make another handwritten note. Great job on that. And then obviously when they pass a check ride. There's lots of moments that are there that we can say, this is a key moment in the plot in your aviation journey, and you matter in the story. Great job. Now the top two issues that surfaced within the surveys that we did, not just the basic customer service stuff, flying specific within the cockpit and the relationship with the flight instructor. The first one was that they viewed the flight instructor as someone that was using them as a means to their end, usually to get hours for moving up in life, moving up in aviation. Well, how can we let people know that they are important? This is the nature of aviation. Most people will not be flight instructors for their whole career. And so how can we, if I'm going to be gone in 6 months, let that person know? I think it's good to have a standard comment to this, that we address the elephant in the room, that we say, yes, it's possible that I'll transition to a different job at some point in my career, but I want you to know that as long as I'm with you, you are my priority. And no matter who is your instructor here at our flight school, they're all very well trained and they're all fantastic. But as long as I'm with you, we are going to have the best experience together, and you are my priority. I like that phrase, you are my priority. And then show it by returning phone calls, going the extra mile, helping on pre-flights, really giving 100% when you're with that person, and then not allowing the lesson plans to become an afterthought. You have a plan and a purpose for them, and this is what you're doing. And you come prepared, and you execute those lessons. And I like touching base in between lessons to let them know, hey, I'm thinking about where your journey is, and I'm thinking about the next lesson. Here's a video for you to watch. I'm looking forward to discussing this with you before our lesson. The second complaint that I got was the handoff between instructors. If somebody had to leave, and I'm getting another instructor, and I'm getting another instructor. And so it's important when we're making that handoff, and we've done this well here at our school, is that if a flight instructor is going on to an airline slot or to a different job, then don't just drop them, but let them know, hey, the time is coming, and then here's your new instructor, and maybe get some flights together with them or introduce them and then hand them off with, here's where he is in the curriculum, and here's some notes about this student. And then the receiving instructor has to really go the extra mile in the personal spaces, emails, texting, communication, to receive them and let them know the handoff is secure, that we value you, and your flight journey is going to continue very well. Your story arc is not going to hit any bumps here because we've made the handoff well. What we do here in our flight schools is so important. We'll never know how the journey of aviation will impact people. I was thinking of a flight that I had with a helicopter. I was flying to a youth camp. And the end of the day, the youth camp, it was a week-long camp. That last day was graduation. And I had flown in some of the leaders there, and it was a big ceremony. But they all left, and I was just kind of waiting, and I was packing my things, getting ready to go. And a friend of mine came to me and said, hey, can you take up my son? He was getting ready for the next week's camp. His son had to be maybe 10 or 11 or 12. And I said, yeah, sure. But what I didn't know was that his mother was very afraid of him going up in this helicopter because the son, Drew, really struggled with debilitating fear and anxiety as a child. You see, as a young child, he had experienced the death of very close teachers and relatives at a very young age. And that opened up a door for this debilitating fear and anxiety in his life. Well, his father just came up to me and said, well, how often do I get a chance to get my kid a ride in a helicopter? And he just said, will you take my son Drew up? I said, sure. I didn't think anything of it. I knew nothing about his personal challenges. And we strapped Drew in, and And I looked, and his mother was very nervous, a little ways away. And again, I was just ignorant. I was just going to take this kid up for a ride. And as I pulled that helicopter into a hover, and we waited there for a few seconds, evaluating the power and just doing aviation things, something broke in the life of that child. That debilitating fear and anxiety, that grip relinquished itself from that child from that moment. And we took him around a little bit. It was a short flight, less than 10 minutes. But that moment where that kid took a step of courage to get into a helicopter because it was the coolest thing there, and he didn't want to miss the opportunity, and the father kind of pushed him, that broke off that, and it was the moment where that changed in his life. Now Drew is a fantastic nurse helping people through very scary situations in their lives. You never know what your involvement in the lives of the students around you or the people around you that will impact their life through aviation. Aviation is an amazing industry. Humans aren't meant to fly naturally, but through our ingenuity and effort, we've created ways to do that. And so I look forward to seeing how you will be used to make lasting, lifelong, and safe impressions in the lives of people through your work here. Godspeed.
Talk to me about the customer service angle. I guess one of the reasons for this interview is that I'm putting together a customer service training for our flight instructors. Pilots can tend to be technical, but the soft skills are important as well. So what do you see on your end? I think NetJets would probably be one of the pinnacle customer service oriented aviation organizations, right? If you're flying for an airline, you may not be high touch like a flight attendant, but in a NetJets environment, seems to me you're a little more high touch with that. So what's the value of customer service techniques or skills for a pilot?
So when we talk customer service, it's multifaceted, just like any trade, right? Any profession. And we spend every year in our recurrent training, we spend, just like CRM is integrated in everything you do, so is service with us. So we hired Diana Orrick. If you Google her name, you'll see that she turned to Ritz-Carlton's service training into what it was. She is an employee of NetJets now, and is a big part of our service initiatives and the whole manual we developed as far as delivering, just top level customer service. And we learn and we adjust this course every year because it's not a static once and done thing. It's ever changing as the demographics of our owners change. A millennial might think different than a Gen X, which might be different than a baby boomer. And really you have to look at what is their level of service? What are they prioritizing? I hate to say it, but safety is almost sort of a given in aviation, and we feel it's not. So they assume you're going to be safe. You're making all the safe decisions for me. Now, what am I getting out of it? What is that service? I like to say moments of neutrality, where you meet somebody and the exchange was fine, but it was just, you kind of had that blah feeling walking away. That is an unacceptable for NetJets. With what our owners are paying for their experience, you really have to kind of go after that platinum rule, we call it, where, meet their demands and their wishes without them having to ask for it. And Emotional Intelligence 2.0 is a really good book for people to read. because we are type A as instructors and as pilots, but the reality is you have to be so aware of your surroundings and what you're saying and how you do it. I just had a survey come through that I was reading where accidentally the owners ate the crew food of the pilots. They didn't mean to do it. It was a short flight. When they realized they accidentally ate the pilot's crew food, they went up to the cockpit, they apologized and said, "Can I give you our food? I'm so sorry." And unfortunately, the pilot's body language said it all, and he was pissed. And he came across pissed off at the owner, to where the owner filled out a survey and it's like we felt bad, but now we really felt bad. Like we didn't mean to do that, you know? So there's so much in the soft skills and your body language and how you stand at the bottom of the stairs and how your uniform looks and is your jacket pressed and how do you greet somebody? How do you know when it's acceptable to shake somebody's hand and when they don't want you shaking their hand? It all plays a very important role in the experience for the owner.
So is there a training in the onboarding process for this?
There is. There's an 8-hour course we deliver.
Oh, wow. An 8-hour customer service course.
There is, yes. Yep.
And you mentioned something that's interesting. You said that different generations expect different things regarding customer service. Can you highlight any of those off the top of your head?
Yeah. So when you think about a baby boomer, it's really about their time, right? Their time means so much to them and they do not want to be delayed. They want to get to where they're going. They want to be with their grandchildren. And they may see past some of the crew food things, the food, or I say crew food, but the passenger catering, they can care less about the catering, right? I'm not saying they couldn't care less about it, but they're not as picky. Gen X, it's about their children, their families, and being home with their families. And so it's more of a work tool. They got to be very effective working on that airplane. But by God, when they get home, they want to be unplugged from work. So that Wi-Fi better work in that airplane because they have a lot of work they're doing on that aircraft. And then perhaps the millennials, it's more about the 5 senses, how it looks, how they can impress their friends, the type of music that's on the aircraft, certainly on-time performance is number one for everybody. We have to be on time, but there's little priorities that the various generations prioritize more due to what they've experienced in their upbringing and what they've experienced in their past. And I always say this, the quickest way to an owner's heart is through their children, their grandchildren, and their pets. If you just teach your pilots those 3 things, children, grandchildren, and pets, you spoil those parts of their family member, you're making a friend for life.
And yeah, that's great. And that's part of your customer service training. It sounds like.
Correct. The whole match and mirroring. If you have a group going away for a bachelorette party, you can be way more upbeat and more funny and just make that moment start on that aircraft versus someone going to a funeral
or a board meeting.
So you have to learn to match and mirror what the situation is.
Yeah, we call it match emotion with emotion.
Yeah.
And overall, what would you say you're looking for in a pilot? How do you get hired at NetJets? What's the kind of pilot you're looking for?
So first off, I guess the best word I can use is humble. I mean, they certainly have to have an element of confidence in what they're doing. They have to be safe. But we want somebody that's very willing and apt to learn, very humble, and that goes with it. Like every day changes. So if somebody wants the structure of bidding their schedule, knowing what they're going to do for their days, and I'm going to wake up this day and go home this day, we are not their air carrier. When you work, you're 7 on, 7 off, or 8 on, 6 off. There's a couple different schedules we have. When you're going to work, and you can plan on being home before midnight your last day. Whatever whatever happens in between there is going to be different. So they got to understand how to get well rested at night and take advantage of their rest, because You're going to have about 12 hours off and your next day is going to be a 14-hour day. So we've seen people come in here and they're just not good with change, right? And if you're not good with change, you won't be successful at NetJets because no 2 days are the same. You may be ferrying from Teterboro to West Palm Beach and get diverted to Charlotte, and that's the norm, So
You gotta hit the curveballs, basically.
Yeah, you
Yes.
got it. Yep. Unfortunately, they're not all underhanded.
Right, yeah. Yeah, some type A personalities are good fastball hitters, but they really struggle with
Yes.
curveballs.
That's exactly right.
Well,
Yeah, thank you for your time.
yeah, thank you. And, if you're in the neighborhood in Traverse City this summer, maybe we can connect.
All right. We'd love to. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yep. Thank you, guys. Bye.